This is one of the directives issued on the part of the Union Health Ministry. The second, of course, is to conduct genome sequencing for all international travelers. Just an added layer of precaution being recommended. The third such recommendation is to increase awareness for precaution dose. We're talking at a time when approximately a quarter of India's adult population has been administered the precaution dose. That's clearly not an adequate number. Fourthly, enforce COVID protocol in crowded places so that we do not have a repeat of what we first started witnessing in 2020 when there was an increased presence of COVID in localized cluster. So let's in fact take this across to our guests as well. Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, Chairman of Nephron, is with us, as is Mr. Rajeev Jayadevan, Co-Chairman of the National IMA COVID-19 Task Force as well. Dr. Jayadevan, coming to you first, tell us about the situation that prevails in the country as of now. The latest daily count that we've come across is 1,134 cases. Is there a cause for alarm, and what would be the prescription to several states going out at this time?
As you said, there is an increase in the total number of cases. But at this time, the hospitals on the ground are not seeing a spike in the cases, especially in the ICUs or in the wards at this time. But India is a large country, and what has been reported one center or one region need not represent what is happening elsewhere. But we know that a new sublineage of Omicron, it's called XBB.1.16, is in circulation in India. A good number of sequences, the recent sequences from India, are of this particular sublineage, which is supposed to have slightly greater ability to spread, and that is only expected of what we have seen of Omicron in the last year. But what we are seeing among the cases that we see are just asymptomatic cases or mild instances. But that does not mean it's going to stay the same for the next month or so, because we know from the story of Omicron that it took just 6 weeks to cover the whole world. So we must be vigilant. I don't see a need for panic, but it is definitely worth preparing, because if a virus is able to cover the world in 6 weeks, it's important to be prepared and make sure that your systems are running.
Let me take this across to Dr. Sanjeev Bagai as well. Dr. Bagai, are you disappointed in some respects that the booster dose coverage so far is approximately about 25% of our adult population? Do you believe that is grossly inadequate, and should more be done to encourage people to come out and get the booster?
So two quick points. I think it's not over till it's over. Omicron, like it has been mentioned, is spreading extremely fast globally. We have seen more than 1,000 plus sublineages of Omicron. The earlier one till a few weeks back was XBB 1.5, called as Kraken, and now it is XBB 1.16, known as Arrakis. Now, what this actually does is it is using the ORFB genetic platforms called as 9B, which have actually shifted the door from the entry point of view and has blocked off the immune response. So it is more invasive, it is definitely more transmissible, and it is causing more amount of immune evasion, both immunity-wise and vaccine immunity-wise. The natural infections of the past COVID are not holding as good. So the entire concept of hybrid immunity has taken a relook. I also must add that there are various kind of changes which have taken place genetically internally in Omicron, which are now being called as saltation profiles. That means it is binding more quickly onto the ACE receptor proteins of the RBD, receptor binding protein of the host. Now, when it comes to where India stands at the present moment, it is very often said as a misnomer that Omicron is mild. But mild, like I've said very, very often in the last 3 years, is very relative. Mild for a strong person can remain mild, and mild for a person with comorbidities or a non-boosted individual can be moderate to severe or indeed critical. We need to push the booster. There is a disadvantage now what globally every citizen has is because of what we call as immune imprinting or immune dumping phenomena, that your earlier vaccines have been made against the original strain known as the wild type Wuhan strain, and they are not as good and as effective against the present generation of the sublineages. The efficacy has gone down close to 50%, but even the AstraZeneca and the Covaxin are holding good above 90% to prevent serious infections and death. My request to the Indian government would be as follows. that the entire campaign of the vaccine and the boosters need to be reignited.
Okay.
Even if it is not as effective, it will still be useful and give protection, especially to the vulnerables. Point number two, we've heard of the intranasal vaccine. I've said this very often again, that the intranasal vaccine of Covaxin gives you an immediate blockage at the entry point. It gives you a very good memory resident T cell protection of the lungs, and it prevents lung pathology. It is extremely useful, and it can even be used as a heterogeneous regime to give better efficacy as far as the Indian population is concerned. It's very quick, it's cost effective, there are no jabs involved, and it works even quicker than an intramuscular shot.
Okay, Dr. Jaydevan, coming back to you, the prescription as far as Dr. Bagai is concerned is of course to encourage more people to now step out and take the booster. Do you see now a return to a restrictive regime, at least as far as masking up is concerned, as a prescription that goes out to the public? And what about crowded spaces? Because a lot of those restrictions over time, as the COVID cases began to recede, have been relaxed. So what do the governments now have to do on a larger scale to prevent or contain the spread of this surge that we're witnessing right now?
That's an excellent question. We know that COVID-19, the virus that causes it, spreads almost like mist in closed spaces where people gather and when the ventilation settings are not very good. So in other words, it's almost like cigarette smoke spreading in the same room when there's no air circulation. So in such spaces, when there are plenty of people, and if there are older individuals also sharing the space, and if there's even one infected person, yes, these people can get infected. In a younger individual or a person who has been previously vaccinated, it's unlikely to cause severe disease. But that's not the case for someone over the age of 70. For example, right now, in the past month in the United Kingdom, there have been an increase selectively in 70-plus age group of people coming down with COVID. And there are instances of people visiting these care homes and bringing them back to families. So I would single out that particular segment of the population because age is a high risk factor for, as Dr. Bagai said, Omicron is not a mild virus. It's just that in many cases it is mild, but in many other cases it is not so mild. And particularly older individuals, I've seen them destabilize. They have underlying medical conditions which may destabilize and can land them in a spot of bother.
Okay.
So that is something that I would caution against, and I would also encourage wearing of masks in crowded, ill-ventilated settings, particularly where seniors are mingling.
Point to be noted. Dr. Bagai, final question. We're also dealing with a bout of influenza right now, quite prevalent in different parts of the country, largely being attributed to a change in weather as well. So therefore, we're facing a multi-pronged problem, though not nearly as lethal as what we've experienced before.
Yeah, so we clinically, it's always very quickly. Clinically, it's always a dilemma because when a person comes in with an apparent viral infection of a sore throat, mild runny nose, or cold or cough, there are four basic diagnoses, and you have to gauge your clinical sense to differentiate between them. One is COVID, second is H3N2, the third is a common cold, including adena and echo, Coxsackie viruses, which infect the upper respiratory tract, and fourth is seasonal allergies. So what really differentiates COVID versus as flu, as H3N2 is that the incubation period of flu is much quicker, although COVID is much more lethal. It's 6 times more lethal as compared to the flu. But the important approach in the first 2 or 3 days is the wait and watch, observation, isolation, masking, test sensibly at an appropriate time, and please get your medical evaluation done. Don't take home treatment.
Okay, many thanks, Dr. Jaydevan, as well as Dr. Bagai, as insightful as always. Many thanks indeed. We will slip into a short break right now. We'll come back with a lot more lined up for you on the other side. Stay tuned for more updates.